Okay, well, hello everyone, and thank you for joining us today. In today's Square 9 webinar, we're going to present an overview of our business process management tool called GlobalAction. Many of you have a process or set of processes that a document must move through during its life. This could be a simple or a complex approval process for invoices or expenses based on departments or dollar values, a retention schedule for human resources documents, or expiration notifications for certifications and trainings. Using a quote-unquote Nike network, i.e. running the documents from one person to the next, is a very inefficient process and results in documents collecting on someone's desk or just getting lost. It also provides no visibility into where that document is in the current process, who or what is holding that document up, or any access to that document during the process. With GlobalAction, we have a powerful tool that can use both automated and user interaction to increase the efficiency of this process by allowing us to gain access to the document during the approval process, allowing us to see where the document is currently waiting in the approval process, sending out notifications and reminders of documents that require action, rerouting documents that have been waiting beyond whatever we deem is an acceptable time for that particular document, or even who is currently responsible for taking action on that document. GlobalAction has an analytics tool that's included that presents us with a graphic representation of how the documents are moving through our workflow, how much time they're spending in a particular queue, to allow us to better analyze how efficient that process is, and if we maybe need to make some changes to it. So what I'm going to do today is I'm just going to give you a broad overview of GlobalAction. We'll discuss the layout, we'll discuss nodes and properties and how we use them, and then we'll construct a simple workflow so that we can learn what the different nodes do, we can see how we can connect those nodes together to create a process for a document to move through. We'll take a brief look at our analytics portal so we can get an idea of how we can use that information for the documents in the workflow to better improve our workflow. And finally, we'll look at some more advanced workflows that highlight some of the other nodes that we don't get to in our basic workflow. So I'm going to go ahead and get rid of this. And we're going to start by logging into GlobalAction. To get into GlobalAction, we simply log into our Global Search client. So I've got mine open here already. I've already logged in using my username and password, as creating workflows in GlobalAction is an administrative tool. You must be logged in as an administrator to complete that. If you have multiple databases, you need to select the database that you want to build the workflow in. To find the workflow, we click on the little lock icon directly to the right of our Global Search logo and choose our GlobalAction design. Now, we create all of our workflows in the web client, in the Global Search web client, but all of our workflows will operate on both documents in the Global Search and within Smart Search. So those same buttons that you used to see for Work Exchange are still going to be available in Smart Search when you're accessing it either locally or remotely. So a quick overview of our layout. Okay, down the left-hand side, we have what we call nodes. And you can see there's a list of them here. And nodes are the elements we use to design our workflow. And I will talk about each node as we use it. We'll discuss briefly what it does and how we can apply it to different situations. Down the center here, we have our design window. This is where we're going to drag and drop our nodes to build our workflow. On the right, we have properties. Properties is an area that allows us to set variables that we can then use in our workflow. We can create properties that allow us to have a static value. Maybe we create a property with an email address in it, or a property that always searches for or always has a set value, a numerical value, a text value, something to that effect. We can also set them as variable values. We could set a property to be connected to an index field within Smart Search. So it'll pull an index field value for that particular property. Down here we have our information pane. The information pane gives you a quick overview of what a particular node is doing. So when we click on a node, you'll see the information about that node show up. Any description you gave it, the name you gave it, anything really associated with that. Up here we have unpublished. Right now when we build a workflow, it is initially unpublished, which means even if we complete it, it's not working. So we click the unpublished to change it to published when we're ready to execute that workflow and have it operate on the documents that we have stored within Smart Search and Global Search. The layout option works with our layout in the design window. So right now I have it set for none, which means I can basically take the nodes and do whatever I want with them. But I can also force it to align horizontally and vertically. I can show or hide labels, and I can zoom in and zoom out to make things bigger or smaller. So your layout really operates on our design window. And then finally, our workflow tab is where we have our options to create new workflows, to save our workflows, to open workflows, to delete workflows. Now, when you're designing your workflow, you're going to want to save as you go along. To delete an option from your workflow after you drag it onto the screen, and I'll explain what all of this is here in just a second here. We simply click on that object and we hit the delete button on our keyboard. Do not hit the backspace button. It will back up your browser to the previous window and you will lose any unsaved work. So that's why it's very important that when you are building your workflow, you save it as you go along. All right, so let's start by building a very simple workflow. We're going to build a workflow that handles a one-step approval process for an invoice. Okay. So the invoice is entered into Smart Search using any one of our capture capabilities. The document is indexed and filed away into an archive. Then it's picked up by GlobalAction and routed for approval based on, in our case, we're basing it on a cost center or department, but it really can be based on any index field criteria. We will send out a notification to a person or group of people, notifying them that they have documents waiting for approval. Then we can show that they can log in and take action on that document. With the security that GlobalAction offers, only people secured to a particular, what we call queue, will be able to take action on that document. And then once they take action, the document status can be changed to approved or declined or whatever the options happen to be, and the document can come out of the workflow. Now, one of the big differences between WorkExchange, our old workflow engine, and GlobalAction, our new workflow engine, is the way we find documents. With GlobalAction, we can with our GlobalAction is based on searches. So we don't have to worry about where the documents are located or being located in multiple archives and therefore needing multiple workflows. We can create a search, either in Smart Search or Global Search, that finds all of the documents we're interested in, and regardless of the archive that they reside in. We just open up that search to work in many different areas. So I have already taken the liberty of creating a search in Smart Search in my vendor invoices archive. So I called it GA pending status. One of the practices we have here at Square 9 is anytime we create a search that is designed for a GlobalAction workflow, we always start it with the letters GA. And that just acts as a reminder so that when you right-click in Smart Search here to run a search, that search will work, but it reminds us that this is a GlobalAction search, and if I make any changes to this search, it could affect my workflow. I'm simply basing it on an approval status index field, and it's got to be pending. I'm setting it to a fixed value of pending, so it only returns invoices that have a pending status and does not have any invoices that have already been approved or declined or any other status that might exist. So the first step in building this workflow is getting our documents. And we do that with our first node, our green Go Initiator Node. Every workflow requires one Initiator Node, and it can only have one Initiator Node. When I drop the Initiator Node onto the design surface, I am prompted with a window that asks me for certain values. Now, anything with a red star is a required field. So I'm going to go ahead and give this node a title. We'll call it Invoice Approval. And we can go ahead and give it a more detailed description if we would like. Pending invoices for sales department. And then we select the search we want to run. So I'm going to scroll through my list of searches, and I'm going to choose the search that we just created, GA Pending Invoices. And then I can choose how often I want this workflow to look for new documents. I'm going to have it look once a day, but you can have it look as often as once a minute, depending on how often you want it to check for new documents. I'm going to click Save, and my Initiator Node is on the screen. Now what I need to do is I need to look through all of the documents in that vendor invoices archive and get the pending documents out, but my sales department only wants to see the ones that apply to them. They do not want to look at the invoices for production or any of the other departments. So we can begin with a condition node that will allow us to sort through those documents and only get the particular documents that we're looking for that the search returned. So we will call this sort sales. It's going to be based on a field. So the field is going to be what we call cost center. It's going to be equal to sales. Now, because cost center is a drop-down list, when I start typing, it gives me the possible values. Now I will click Save. If we take a quick sidebar here, we can see that the information node has the information I just entered. The name, the name I gave it, the field it's operating on, the condition, and the value. So I'm going to take all of those documents that the search found, and I'm going to connect them to my condition node. So every document that's found through the search first must pass this condition node. And that condition node is checking to see if they belong to the sales department. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to deal with the invoices that first meet that criteria. What I want to do is I want to send an email. So I'll use the email node. When I place that on the screen, it asks me for a title. We'll call this Email Sales. I can give it a description. I can choose who it goes to. I will just send it to myself. I can choose who it's from. This could just be, I could just say GA at square-9.com. Okay. These do not have to be valid email addresses. They just have to be in a valid format. If it's an invalid email address, in the to box, obviously nobody's going to get that email. The from is just indicating where it's coming from. I can go ahead and CC. And I can attach a subject line, pending invoice. And I can also use my index field information to populate these fields. So rather than just letting myself know that this invoice is waiting my approval, I can actually use information from index fields. So I can actually pull an invoice number from Smart Search. So I click on that, and now the subject of my email will be pending invoice, 691453, whatever that invoice number happens to be. I can do the same thing in the body of my email. I can leave a static message. You have an invoice waiting. And I can put some information in there as well. Maybe I want to put the vendor name in there so that without ever going to the document, I at least get an idea of what it looks like. Sorry, I'm actually off my screen here, so we'll do this. There we go. Vendor name. And maybe I also want to know the dollar amount. So now when I receive that email, I'll have an invoice number, a vendor name, and a vendor amount, and those are variable or dynamic fields that are populated based on index field data. I can include the document if I want as an attachment. I can, if it's marked up with annotations, I can include those as well. And I'm just going to save as is. I'm now going to connect my condition node to my email. And one of the things you'll notice is it asks me, is this what I want to happen when it equals sales or when it does not equal sales? So in this case, I'm going to say equals sales and click Save. So I've been notified that I have a document awaiting approval. So now what I want to do is I want to wait for that document to get approved. I don't want it to just move through the process and end. I want somebody to have to take action on it. To do that, we scroll down to what we call our queue node. Our queue node is where we can create an option, a set of buttons that a user has to interact with in order to have that document move through the process. So I will title this a sales queue. And this is where we can control security. I can select who has the correct permissions to take action on that document. So I can choose exactly who has the ability to approve it. If anybody who's not in the SS admin group or Phil tries to access this document, they will be able to see the document, but they will not be able to move it along through the approval process. Now I'm going to put a wait node inside that sales queue. This node simply holds the document up. So I'm going to tell it to wait 1 day. So a duration of 1 day, and click Save. And now I'll connect my email to my wait node. So after I get that email, the document is going to go into the sales queue where only a certain few people can access it to take action on it. Now, we don't want it to just stall there. So there's 2 ways that we can have documents come out of a wait node: user actions or auto actions. If I drag an arrow from here back to my email, it creates an arrow going the other way. I can then move this down out of the way. And what will happen is after 1 day, it'll send me another notification. So every single day, I'll get a notification that I have to take action on this email. Now, in the interest of time, I'm not going to build this sales queue out further, but we could use this opportunity to create an escalation rule. After it sits for a certain number of days, it moves on to somebody else for approval, or it can automatically be approved or declined, whatever that process looks like for you. But I do want to be able to approve this document. So what I can do is I'm going to take a set field node. The set field node allows me to set an index field. I'm going to call this set as approved. And my index field will be approval status, and my value will be approved. Once again, this is a drop-down list, so it gives me the options. So what's going to happen is when I connect this little white circle on my sales queue to the set node, it's going to ask me the title. This is the text that will show up in the button within Smart Searched. I will click Save. So you can see this connection extends from the wait node. This is an automated action. This action extends from the sales queue. This is a user action. So there's going to actually be a button on this document for me to click that says approved. When I click that button, it will set our index field from pending to approved, which means it will no longer be ingested into this workflow because it no longer meets the status of pending. And then I can use my end node to end the flow. So I connect to my end node. Every workflow needs to have at least one end node, but it can have more than one. We can repeat this process for the declined option. So we will set to declined. Our status will be approval status, and our value will be declined. Once again, we will connect that from our circle. And what we want to show up is declined. We will save, and then we can connect that to our end node. So Documents that have pending status come into our workflow. If their cost center is sales, we send out an email, we wait a day, we send an email, we wait a day till that person takes action, either approve or declining, and then ending it. But we still have this condition. What if it isn't equal to sales? Well, in that case, maybe we route it to a different department, a marketing or a production or a shipping department. We can extend our workflow. For our purposes, I'm just going to end it and create another end node. So if it's not equal to sales, we'll just end it. So what this looks like in Smart Search is when you open up the document in the document viewer window, you will see a set of workflow actions, approve or decline. Both of them will change the approval status for us. And then because of that, they'll no longer be ingested into the workflow. The same options would be available if looking at that document in Global Search as well. So if we wanted to check to see how this workflow is performing, we would go to our Global Analytics tool, which is up here in the top right. Looks like a little mountain range. We click on that, we click on the Analytics portal. And right now it's showing for all workflows. I want to look at that workflow we just created called GA Invoice Approval. And I have already built this workflow out, and I threw some documents into it so we could see what this might look like. And what we have are, we can look at our workflow status. We can see how many documents have moved entirely through the workflow, whether it is documents that have been approved because they had the sales cost center, or whether it's documents that didn't and just exited the workflow. We can see how many documents are sitting in the queue. So we have 14 documents that made their way to that approval queue and are waiting somebody to take action on them. Okay. If there were any documents that were in the process of moving through the workflow, they would show up as a white section of the donut. And if any documents errored out for some reason, it would show up in orange, and we'd have to go address those in the batch manager. Over here, we have our queue durations. So we can see how long documents are sitting in a particular queue. So we have a sales approval queue. This particular workflow only had one queue, but this shape would change based on the number of queues that you would have so that you could see how long documents are spending within the queue itself. We can see how long they take on average, shortest, longest, and average, for the documents that are spending in that queue. So you can get an idea of which queues documents are potentially getting hung up in. Down at the bottom here, we could see how many documents are entering our workflow over the time period we've selected, in this case, 1 week. So in that case, within the last week, I've had 12 documents newly enter the workflow, and I've had 10 documents leave the workflow all within the last week. Remaining within and remaining left would be documents that came in before the time frame that we've set, or have left after the time frame that we set. So the Global Analytics tool is a very powerful tool for you to look at where your documents could potentially be getting hung up in that workflow process. So I'm going to go back to my design template here. So I'm logging back into my GlobalAction. And there were a couple of nodes I haven't hit on yet. So what I want to do is I want to show you some of those different nodes and what we can do with them. So I'm going to open up a workflow that I already have built out. It's one that might be familiar if you've been a fan of our GlobalAction webinars in the past. It's the table field validation workflow. And what this workflow does in a nutshell is it looks at an invoice, it pulls the line item data, it sums up the totals, it compares the total to the index field for the total amount of the invoice, and then either sets it to approved or waits for it to be validated. So you can see we have our initiator node, we have our condition, we have a queue over here, we have a wait node, and so on. But we have two nodes we hadn't talked about. We have the set property node, and we have the call assembly node. The set property node is where we use the properties that we create. So in this case, we created three properties. One called connection, which is where we store our connection string to gain access to the database that has all of our table field data in it. One we called SQL, which actually selects the data from the database. So the first property tells us where the database is. The second property tells what information to pull. The call assembly is actually a DLL that takes that information and adds it together for us. So the call assembly node is a powerful node. It's a wildcard activity that allows you to integrate or call custom programs into GlobalAction workflows. In this case, it's an SQL script. It sums up the line item data, and then the condition compares it to the index field of total. If the two are equal, it sets it to approved and ends it. If they're not equal, just to complete the process, we bring it down to a queue where it waits to be fixed, and it checks it again every hour, or if somebody clicks the fixed button. Okay, so this is another example of a way that you can use GlobalAction and some of the other nodes that we have available to us in a process that, in a potential approval process or a matching process in an accounts payable situation. Now, these workflows have been fairly simple, but we can also create more complex ones. This is another workflow that Brian Bannett had created for a previous webinar, and this is a more complex approval process. What's going on here is we have a multi-stage approval process. So as a document comes in, it's sorted based on its cost center or department. We have sales, marketing, admin, or development. Once it's routed to the proper area, a manager takes action on that document, whether it's sales or marketing, and then that document leaves the workflow. In any case, if he rejects it, we bring it to we move it to a different archive. So there's the move node. We set its field to rejected, and we're done with it. But if the manager in any of these departments approves the document, now we have another condition that checks the dollar value. So first we checked the department, now we're checking the dollar value. If it's less than a certain amount, we can route it and we're done with it. If it's more than a certain amount, and that amount is whatever you decide, we can then route it for approval to other people. So in this case, if it's less than $1,000, it's fine, it's done. The manager of the department has that approval rights. If it's more than $1,000, it gets routed either to the sales director or the technology director, and that decision is based upon not only the dollar value, but also the department that it belongs to. Once the sales director or technology director take action on that document, they can decline it, in which case it exits the workflow, or they can approve it. We do one last check to determine at the dollar value. Under $10,000, it gets routed out of the workflow. Over $10,000, it gets routed to the other director for a third level approval process. So workflows that are created can be very simple, or they can be more complex. So even though this one may look a little bit challenging, the process it follows is very simple. And the process that the users interact is also very simple. You have a department manager getting a yes or no, then you have a sales director and a technology director getting a yes or no. So we're able to take that document, move it to multiple people in multiple areas to get an approval process without having to worry about physically taking that document from one person to the next, or somebody making a mistake in delivering it to the wrong area. It is automatically handled for us. Now, just a quick visit on a few of the nodes we didn't touch on. As I mentioned, the move node allows us to take a document and move it to a different archive. So if I were to drop this node on the screen here, I would give it a title, move to invoices, and I could select the destination archive that I wanted to go to. We also didn't touch on the Global Forms node. We can actually use our workflow to send out an email link to a global form. So maybe I want to do this for a new hire. I can click OK. I can enter that information in here, and that new hire will receive a link to that global form that I selected that they can then fill out and submit so that it can end up within Smart Search. We also have an export data node. The export data allows you to get the index field data out of Smart Search as a CSV file. We give it a title, and we tell it where we want to store that document. We can include document column headers as well so that you can see what each column is. For example, invoice number, and then it will provide you to a list of those invoice numbers. And lastly, the note node is exactly what it says. It's just a node that we can type information in so that we can leave notes on our workflow for reference when we come back to it. Okay, this has been our introduction to our GlobalAction business process management tool. As you can see, it's a very powerful tool that has many capabilities that can be used in many different areas of your business. You can see that it's extremely versatile, using the call assembly to access external applications. It can be built out to handle approval processes, retention scheduling, really any process that you can define that you move a document through now. If it has logic to it, GlobalAction is a very powerful tool that can be used to automate that process for you. Okay, we've got just a couple of questions for us today, so I'll go ahead and answer those. The first question is, will this recording be available? Yes, this video was recorded, and it will be edited and posted on our website so that you can gain access to this webinar and any webinar that has happened in the past as well. Another question was, how come when I hover over a particular node, some of the arrows turn green and some of the arrows turn red? And the answer to that question is, when we hover over a node, all of the actions that are either coming into that node or out of that node are highlighted for us. Anything highlighted in red is a process entering that node. Anything highlighted in green is a process leaving that node. So you can see when I hover over the weight node, I've got a process coming in that occurs when the returned value of the sum of the table field data does not equal the index field data. And then I've got an out node. After an hour, waiting an hour, it leaves the wait, comes back to the call assembly, and runs that check again. In my call assembly node, you can see I'm passing it the information to check that I want the call assembly to add together. It's also could potentially be receiving either of these processes here. And then the only way out of the call assembly is to run that SQL select query DLL, sum up the table data, and check it against the index value. So red is coming into a node, green is coming out of a node. Okay, someone asked, with the export data node, what does the file look like? With the export data node, that exports index field data as a CSV file. So you could then open that file up into Excel. You could export it to another program that accepts CSV uploads for the index field information. Someone asked, this is not really to GlobalAction, but is Global Search included as a base feature with Smart Search, or is it ordered as a line item? Global Search, which is our web client, which allows you to gain access to your documents from any web-connected device with a modern browser, whether it's a tablet, a phone, or a Mac, or a PC, is included with Smart Search. GlobalAction, which is this workflow piece, is an add-on module in the Professional Edition. It is included with the Corporate Edition. So everybody who gets Smart Search gets Global Search, but you do have to get the GlobalAction add-on for the workflow if you already have the Professional Edition, or if you have the Corporate Edition, it is included. Okay, it appears that that is all we have for questions. I want to thank everybody for their time today. I hope you found today's webinar informative. And I just wanted to mention that you can contact marketing about our Encompass seminar that's happening down in Florida this October. It's a great time to get down there, learn about what the latest in document management we have to offer is, and it gets you out of a potentially cold October, cold couple of days in New England in October for those of you who live in colder areas up here. You can enjoy some fun and sun, learn about some document management, learn what we have to offer, the exciting new things that are coming down the pipeline here at Square 9. Once again, I want to thank you all for joining our webinar today. Like I said, it will be posted on our website. Enjoy the rest of your day.